to initialize the object using methods, that is using no-arg method and parameterized method, and also with reference variables. These are the three topics. First I will explain. After that I will explain literals. Okay. So already explained in the last class. There are 8 ways to initialize an object. Only these are the 8 ways if you want to initialize an object. So what are the 8 ways? So using default constructor, using user-defined no-arg constructor, user-defined parameterized constructor, then direct initialization means at the time of declaring the instance variables, we can initialize them. This is called direct initialization. Next, copying the object. First, you create one object and copy the address of that object into another reference variable. Means both the reference variables are pointing to the same object. This is the concept, that is copying the object. Next, now in today's class, I will complete these first. That is using reference variables also, we can initialize the object. Next, using no-arg method and using parameterized method. These 8 are very, very important. If you take any Java program, we have to initialize the object. That is must. Because after defining the class, it is important to create the objects for that class. So how do we create the objects for that class? Or how do we initialize the objects for that class is using these 8 ways. You can use any one of these 8 ways. Okay. Using constructors, we can initialize the objects, or using methods also we can initialize the objects, or using these 3 concepts also we can initialize the objects. But here the important point to remember is always use constructors to initialize the objects. If you use these 5 ways, there are drawbacks. Okay, I will explain the drawbacks. Okay, that's why always the main purpose of constructors is to initialize the objects. That's why always use any one of these 3 constructors to initialize the objects. Okay, now coming to the reference variables. So you know reference variable means if the statement is like student S1 is equal to new student, in that S1 is called reference variable. Why it is called reference variable is because it is storing the address of the object. That's why it is called reference variable. Okay. Now I will explain how to initialize the objects using reference variables. Okay. Now see, most of the program is same. Only the new concept I will explain. So here the class student, you know, class name. Inside this, these are the instance variables. Why? Because these are defined inside the class and outside the method or constructor or block, and are not declared with static keyword. That's why roll number, marks and name are called instance variables, and also primitive variables. Not all primitive variables. Roll number and marks are primitive variables because these 2 variables are declared with primitive data types, and name is called a reference variable because it is declared with class data type, that is string data type. That's why name is called reference variable and is also instance variables, whereas roll number and marks are primitive variables and also instance variables. So here this is the state part. It consists of only instance variables, and you know inside each object only instance variables of that class are stored. That is the main important point with respect to objects. Inside each and every object of student class, only instance variables are stored. So how to identify the instance variables? That is most important point. So how to identify means instance variables are declared inside the class and outside the method or block or constructor, and not declared with static keyword. So those variables are called instance variables. Here roll number, marks and name are called instance variables, and these 3 we can create any number of objects. 1000 objects also we can create. Okay. So inside each object of student class, only instance variables are stored. Means here in this program, Roll number, marks and name are stored inside each object of student class. This is the most important point. Without understanding this instance variables concept, there is no use of writing Java programs. That's why concentrate more on basics. Don't by heart the Java programs. Once you understand the concepts, once you can write any number of programs on your own. In place of student, take employee and take employee properties as instance variables, or bank account. Take the bank account properties as instance variables and take box variables. Why we have to take instance variables is because instance variables are stored inside each and every object of that class. That's why here state part consists of both instance variables and static variables. Now I am not explaining static variables. I will explain static variables later. Now concentrate only on instance variables. Okay. If you take this class, it consists of only state part. Here there is no behavior part because here I have not written any method inside this class. That's why already in the first class I explained class consists of both state and behavior part, or only state part, or only behavior part. Okay. These are the three ways we can define the class in Java. Okay. Here if you see this class, it consists of only state part. This is also correct. Next. I will take one more class, student demo. Why this class is required? That is most important. So after defining this student class, so to access the members of the student class, we need to create the object for student class. Okay, see, class is defined only once in any program. But after defining the class like this, we can create any number of objects for that class. So where do we create the objects for that class to access the members of that class? Is inside the same class, we can write main method, and inside that main method, I can create objects for this student class. That is one way of writing, one way of creating objects for student class. Another way is take one more class, that is student demo, and write the main method inside this second class. And inside the main method of student demo class, I will create the objects for student class. So there are two ways to create objects in any Java program. So if you define the student class like this, if you can write main method in the same class. Inside that main method, I can create objects for student class to access the members of this class. Okay, that is one way. Second way is take another class and inside that class write the main method. Inside the main method create the objects for student class. Now here our focus is on student class. How do I access the members of the student class? Concentrate on this class. This class is not important. This class why I am taking is only to write the main method. I am using this class. Otherwise here my focus is on student class. And how do I access the members of the student class? Members means they can be methods or variables. Okay. Now, after defining student class, I will create objects for student class to access the members of the student class. Why objects are required? This is the important point. So, after defining the class, why we need to create objects? For answer is, so after by creating the objects for that class, we can access the members of that class. For that purpose, I am creating objects for that class. Okay, compulsory we have to create objects for student class. Otherwise, without creating objects of student class, how can I access the members of the student class? Access the members of the student class without creating the objects for student class. That's why in Java, class and object, these two are very, very important. So class is defined only once, but after defining the class, we can create any number of objects. That's why objects are also called instances. Why instances means, so if you create one object, this is called one instance. Okay, at this instance or at this point of time, so student object is having some that values for roll number, marks and name. But if you create one more object, this is called second instance. Why it is called second instance is at this point of time, thus this student is having different values for roll number, marks and name. That's why object or instance. We can use these two terms. Okay, each object is nothing but an instance of that class. So here how many objects are created for student class? 2 objects. Like that we can create any number of objects. There is no restriction on the number of objects to be created. It depends on your requirement. Suppose if your section is having 67 students, then to take the details from all the 67 students, create 67 objects. Okay, so with each object I can give different values for that particular student. Okay, now here I have created 2 objects. Next what will happen? Now I will explain the concept in class. So first, whenever you execute this program, and one more important point, so during the compilation time, what the compiler will do? So if you compile this program, this is only a single program. It consists of 2 classes. Program is only one. So how do we save this file is, because student demo.java and the compilation is Java C student demo.java. When you compile this program, because it consists of 2 classes, so 2 dot class files are created. They are this is student dot class file and student demo dot class file. But during execution, because main method is there in this class, that's why execute Java student demo. Then what will happen? JVM will start execution from the main method of student demo class. Okay, first I will explain compilation. So when you compile this program with Java C student demo.java, what will happen is compiler will compile this program. So during the compilation time, the compiler will check whether student class consists of any constructor. Okay, but here there is no constructor in student class. So here what the compiler will do is, if there is no constructor in that student class, the compiler will provide default constructor for this student class. What is default constructor? So student norg. Inside that constructor already explained, roll number is assigned 0, marks are assigned 0.0f and name is assigned null. Because the default constructor will assign default values for all the instance variables of that class based on the data type. Already explained this concept. Now, so during execution, first JVM starts from the main method. Okay, so it will go to the inside the main method. So it will execute first this statement. So whenever this statement is executed, first JVM will go to the student class and executes the matching constructor. Okay, whenever an object is created, compulsory one constructor must be executed, whether it is default constructor or user defined constructor. Okay, this is called object creation. So whenever an object is created, compulsory one constructor must be executed. You remember this point, very, very important point. So here, now it is called constructor. You know now it is student norg. So first it will go to, based on this name, it is JVM will go to the student class and verifies and executes the matching constructor. So that already the default constructor is provided by the compiler during compilation time. That's why the JVM will execute the matching constructor, which is nothing but default constructor, and an object is created. Inside that object, the values are roll number is 1, marks are 0.0 and name is null. Okay, so here this right hand side is nothing but object. U is an operator which will allocate memory dynamically for that object. So here right hand side part is nothing but object creation. Inside that object, only instance variables are stored. Whenever this matching constructor is executed by the JVM, that is default constructor. Inside the object, the instance variables are assigned with 1, 0.0 and null, because these are the default values for these based on the data types. Okay. Now here object is created, means one address will be there for that object. The address of that object is assigned to S1. Okay, here inside that object, the instance variables are assigned default values. Okay, similarly, this also same. Again, in this statement also, this is called constructor. From this, it will go to the student class and it will execute the default constructor. Again, with the right hand side syntax, an object is created for student class, and inside that object, again, the default values are assigned for roll number, marks and name. So here two objects are created with default values for the instance variables. Okay, that's it. Next, after that, what I am doing? See, I am assigning the instance, I am assigning the values to the instance variables with the reference variables. So, what is the reference variable for first object? Okay, so you know, student S1 is equal to new student, means right hand side is object. This object is having address, unique address, and that address is stored in S1. That's why S1 is called reference variable, because it is storing the address of the object. Okay. Now I am using the reference variable to assign the values to the instance variables of student class. So how do I assign the values to the instance variables of student class is using S1, then using S2. So how do I assign? Use S1 dot roll using dot operator. So S1 dot roll number is 1. S1 dot marks is equal to 90.7F. S1 dot name is equal to Akhil. So because it is a string type name, that's why double quotes string. So here these statements, these three statements are for the initialization of the first object with reference variable S1. Similarly, these three statements are for assigning the values to the instance variables using the reference variable S2. Like that, I am initializing the two objects with reference variables. This is nothing but initialization of objects using reference variables. If you see this dot operator, this is same as structures and unions in C language. Once you define the structure or union, so how do we access the members of that structure or union is by creating a variable for that structure or union, and after that using dot operator we can access the members of structures or unions. This concept is same like structures and unions in C language. Okay. Now after assigning the values, I want to print the values of the two objects. No? How do I print? In the previous programs I have used display method in the student class, and using display method I am printing the values of the two objects. But here I am again using the reference variables to print the objects of the values of the two objects. So how do I print? In the same way using dot operator. So system dot out dot println S1 dot roll number. Next this is space. Next S1 dot marks space S1 dot name. Similarly for the S2. Second object is S2. No? So S2 dot roll number, S2 dot marks and S2 dot name. So here they close the main first, then close the student demo. Here you have to put two closing braces. One is for main method closing brace, another one is student demo class closing brace. Okay. So this is the, okay, here we are using reference variable to initialize the objects. After that I am displaying the objects using reference variables only without using the display method of the student class. So here if you see the memory part, but what is the drawback if you use reference variables is, suppose if you want to create 60 objects for student class, so you need to write the same three statements for 60 times. So the length of the code increases now. So that's why don't use reference variables to initialize the objects. You can use, but if there are only 2 or 3 objects means we can use reference variables to initialize objects. But if you create more objects, it is not suitable. Now here this is the memory. Actually here we have to write first roll number is initialized with 0, marks 0.0 and name null. After that Because whenever you create an object, compulsory constructor is invoked first, no? After that, those values are replaced with these values. This is important. Here she has not written the default values first. So when you write the nodes, first write here roll number is 0, mark 0.0 and name is null. After that, whenever you initialize the object with reference variable, at that time 0 is replaced with 1, 0.0 is replaced with 90.7 and null is replaced with 50. Because first string separate object is created and the address of that object is stored in the name reference variable. Null is replaced with 50. Like that here also first initial values are 0, 0.0 and null. After that, when you assign the values with reference variable s2, then these values are, okay, you will get these values. Means the old values are replaced with these values. You have to explain like that. Okay. Next, last but one is user defined no-arg method. So already explained, no? Constructors are used to initialize the objects. Like that, methods are also used to initialize the objects. But I will explain what is the drawback if you use methods. Okay. Now this is the 7th program, that is initialization of an object using user defined no-arg method. Okay, here methods are of only 2 types. Compiler will not provide methods like constructors. Okay, so we have to create the methods on our own only. Now I will explain this one. Same instance variables. Here I am writing, means I am adding one method to student class. Otherwise the remaining program same, remaining part of the same already explained, no? These instance variables and with this method, the previous programs, this part is same, instance variables and display method. Only what I am doing here is I am adding one method, that is set details. Using this set details method, I am assigning the values to the instance variables. Means initialization of instance variables is nothing but initialization of an object, because inside each object only instance variables of that class will be stored. Okay. Now how do I initialize the object? Using user defined no-arg method is this one, this part. Only understand this part enough. In the same part in the previous programs, I have written user defined no-arg constructor and user defined parameterized constructor. In place of constructors, I am writing methods. But what is the difference between constructor and method is, if you write here constructor, how do we write constructor is take student and no-arg, no return type. But here it is method, no? That's why methods must have return type. That's why void set details, that is no-arg. That's why it is called no-arg method. Syntax is no-arg method because it is having return type. Next, so inside this method, what I am doing, I am assigning values to roll number, marks and name. That's it. Okay, here I am adding only one method in place of constructor. After that, the remaining program same only. So take one more class and write main method, create 2 objects. Next, S1 dot, we have to invoke the methods now, because this student class consists of 3 variables, instance variables and 2 methods. What are the 2 methods of student class? Set details and display. So how do I access the methods of the student class is using the reference variables S1 and S2. Okay, that's why S1 dot set details, S2 dot set details. So using S1 dot set details, I am setting the details for the student 1, first student. Next, similarly, using S2 dot display, S2 dot set details method, I am setting the details for the second student. Like that, I can create any number of objects. Okay, after defining the student class. Next, after that, after initialization of the objects, I want to display the 2 objects. How do I display the details of the 2 objects is using S1 dot display details and S2 dot display details. So set details, not display details, or here display she has written, or you write display details here. Okay, change the method name as display details. Then S1 dot display details, S2 dot display. So these 2 methods are used for setting the details to each and every student of student class. And here These two methods are for displaying the student class objects. Next here, if you observe one more difference, first I will explain these two statements. Again, same concept. Now, how do I explain the concept? Save the file with student demo.java, and when you compile this one, what will happen? So, Java C student demo.java. So, the compiler will compile these two classes. So, when the compiler will compile this class, what it will do first? First, it will check whether the programmer has written any constructor for this class or not. If you observe this class, there is no constructor. Means we have not written any constructor in student class. Only I have written 3 instance variables and 2 methods. They are set details and display. So in this case, what the compiler will do is, during compilation time, the compiler will add default constructor. See here, it is there. The compiler will add default constructor for this class. When the compiler will add default constructor for any class is if the class does not contain any constructor. Okay, if the class is not having any constructor, then only the compiler will add default constructor. So what is the role of default constructor is, it will initialize the instance variables with default values based on the data type. So it is provided by the compiler for this class during the compilation time. Now when you execute the program with the Java student demo, the JVM will go to the student demo class and it will execute the main method first. So inside the main method, this is the first statement which is executed. So when this statement is executed, what the JVM will do is, this right hand side is object creation. No? So whenever it creates an object for student class, first it will execute the constructor of that class. So here what is the matching constructor for this is, from this statement it will go to this constructor because it is provided by the compiler already. Okay, now JVM will execute the matching constructor, that is this one. So when it creates the object for student class, it will assign the instance variables with 0, 0.0 and null. So at this means whenever this statement is executed, an object is created and the instance variables are assigned with default values, that is 0, 0.0 and null. Next, in the same way, whenever this statement is executed by the JVM, again one more object is created for student and the roll number, marks and name are assigned with default values, that is 0, 0.0 and null. Next, these two statements completed. After that, we have written s1.setDetails. So from this statement, it will go to the because on the first object, s1 dot means you understand that on the first object, because 2 objects are created already, no? So on the first object, we are invoking setDetails method. Means this method is invoked, and inside the first object, previously these are the values which are assigned to the instance variables. So whenever this method is executed, so these values are overridden with these values, or these old values are replaced with the new values in the first object. You remember this. Next, after that, again I am invoking setDetails method on the second object. On the inside the second object, old values are default values. Now these values are overwritten with these values whenever this method is executed on the second object. Similarly, after creating 2 objects with values, I am displaying the details of those 2 objects with S1 and S2. Same. Okay, this method is used for displaying the first object and this method is used for displaying the second object. Okay, because here we have created 2 objects for student class. So here this is the program, but here what you can understand is, so here first constructor is invoked. See, understand this point. First constructor is invoked at the time of object creation and it will assign default values. After that, on the same object, method is invoked. Okay, now first constructor is invoked, then the method is invoked. Okay, that's why here we are considering the object 2 times. Okay, first constructor is assigning default values for the instance variables. After that, setDetails method is assigning the actual values for all the 3 instance variables. Okay, constructor must be executed at the time of object creation. So here first constructor is executed. After that, method is executed. Both are here. It is assigning default values. Here this method is assigning actual values. Okay, understand this point. First constructor, then method. Next, after that, I will explain one more concept here. See, constructors are executed automatically at the time of object creation. No need to invoke the constructors explicitly like methods, but methods must be invoked explicitly like this. See, constructor and method both are for the same purpose. Constructors are also behave like methods only, because inside constructors also we are writing some code. That is the functionality of that constructor. Like that, inside the method also we are writing some code. That is the functionality of the method. So constructors and methods both are behaving the same way. But what is the difference between constructor and method? Here is constructors need not be invoked explicitly. At the time of object creation, constructor is invoked by the JVM. We are not invoking the constructor. Means programmer need not invoke the constructor. So who will invoke the constructor is JVM will invoke the constructor here. But that is means at the time of object creation, constructors are to be invoked automatically or implicitly. But here if you take the method, methods must be invoked explicitly. This is nothing but explicit invocation of method with reference variable. Okay, s1 dot set details means here method is invoked explicitly, but constructor is invoked at the time of object creation implicitly. Now that is one more difference between constructor and method. If you see the memory part, so first default values are assigned by the default constructor. After that, using our method set details, we are assigning the actual values for the same object. That's right. Here first constructor is invoked, that is default constructor is invoked, and it assigns default values to the instance variables. After that, we are executing our method, that is set details method. So using the set details methods, using set details method, I am assigning the actual values for the first student. That's why here why I have written two objects is, here actually when you write the notes here, here itself you replace this 0 with 20 and 0.0 with 80.5f and null is with 10. 10 means it is having the address of the string object, that is Ramu. Okay, actually we can write here itself, but she has written two objects. Actually it is on one object only. These are the old values. Means constructor is assigning using default constructor, we are assigning these values. Means the compiler is assigning these values. The programmer is assigning these values using set details method. Means these old values are replaced with the new values. Similarly, second object also, first constructor is invoked and the default constructor the default constructor assigned default values for all these instance variables. After that, using set details method, the programmer is assigning the values. So here 0 is replaced with this 20, 0.0 is with 80.5 and null is replaced with 50, means it is pointing to this object Ramu. Now what is the drawback of this no-arg method is, if you take 100 objects also, all the 100 objects are having the same values. See 20, 20, 80.5, 80.5, Ramu. That is the drawback of no-arg method, like no-arg constructor. So to overcome this drawback, we will go for parameterized method to give different values to different objects. In the same way, we can write the program using parameterized method. See here. Here what is the drawback? First constructor is executed, then the method is executed. Okay. Now we will see parameterized method. So same here, same class student instance variables. Now I am writing the parameterized method. So here what is the parameterized method? Set details is the method name, because it is setting the values to the instance variables. That's why set details. Here in the previous program it is no-arg, but here it is parameterized. This is called parameterized method. Because why it is called method is, it is having return type. That's why it is not constructor, it is method. Okay. So here this method is taking 3 parameters. Why? Because here we have 3 instance variables. So the number of parameters must be same as the number of instance variables. Why? Because through these parameters we are assigning the values to the instance variables. But here one more important point is, when you write the program on parameterized constructor, we have used the variable names which are different from these instance variables. In the parameterized constructor, we have used the parameter names or variable names as roll number 1, marks 1 and name 1. Okay. Now here what I am doing in this method is, I am using the parameter names which are same as the instance variable names. Okay, this also correct. So here the instance variable names are roll number, marks and name. Here the parameter names are also same, which are same as the instance variable names, that is roll number, marks and name. So when you use the same names, then what we have to do is, inside this we have to write this dot roll number is equal to roll number. This dot roll number means this instance variable. So always left hand side we should write instance variables, right hand side we should write parameter names. So when both the names are same, means parameter names and instance variable names are same, then you have to use this. This is a keyword. This refers to the current class object. I will explain this in depth later. Now understand, this refers to the current class object. On which object you are invoking setDetails method, this refers to that object. That's why this dot roll number is equal to roll number, this dot marks is equal to marks, this dot roll name is equal to name. If you use different names, that is roll number 1, marks 1 and name 1, in that case roll number 1 is assigned roll number and marks 1 is assigned to marks and name 1 is assigned to name. Like that you have to write. So these are the two ways we can write the parameters. We can use different names or we can use the same names, that is the names which are same as the instance variable names. Next, this is now our focus is on parameterized method. Using parameterized method, we are initializing the object. Initialization of an object is nothing but initialization of the instance variables. Here we have 3 instance variables. They are roll number, marks and name. Next, after that, display details method is used to display the details of each and every object of student class. So like the same, here I am creating 2 objects. First, whenever you create an object, at that time compulsory one constructor is invoked. The constructors need not be invoked explicitly. At the time of object creation only, compulsory one constructor is executed. So from this, the JVM will go to the student class. So during compilation time, already compiler provided one constructor, because this class is not having any constructor, means the programmer has not provided any constructor for this class. In this class, how do we describe this class is description of student class. Suppose if somebody asks you, how do we describe this class, means class consists of 2 parts, state part and behavior part. Here state part consists of 3 instance variables and behavior part consists of 2 methods. They are setDetails and display details. Like that we can describe each and every class in Java with respect to state and behavior parts. Okay. Now here this class does not contain any constructor, means the programmer has not written any constructor in this class. That's why the compiler will provide default constructor during the compilation time, which will assign default values for all these 3 instance variables. Okay. Now whenever this statement is executed, the JVM will go to student class and it will execute the default constructor which is provided by the compiler. Now, so one object is created with the right hand side syntax, that is with the new student. One object is created in the memory. Inside the object, instance variables are stored, that is roll number, marks and name, and the values are default values 0, 0.0 and null. Okay, whenever this construct is executed, inside the object, the default values are assigned to the instance variables. That's it. Because next, first one object is created and the address is stored in S1. So this statement is completed. Next, whenever it executes this statement, again the default constructor is executed, which will assign default values to the instance variables inside the second object, and the object address is stored in S2. Okay, next. So these 2 statements are completed. So compulsory constructors, here one constructor is executed and here also one constructor is executed, remember. After that, what we are doing is we are invoking our setDetails, that is parameterized setDetails method with 3 parameters or with 3 values. Means we are sending 3 values to the parameters of setDetails method. This is nothing but setDetails method invocation. That is set details method definition. Okay, set details method definition means body is there, but here there is no body. This is only one statement. Through this invocation statement, we are sending the values to the parameters of set details method. So what are the values we should send? Roll number, marks and name. So for the first student, I am assigning 3 values using set details method. First student object reference variable is S1. That's why S1 dot set details 3 values. Similarly, whenever this statement is executed, it will go to the set details method. This is the matching method. Then this method is executed and this roll number, marks and name are assigned to the instance variables inside the object. Similarly, I am invoking set details method second time for the second object. First here also first constructor is executed and the first object is created with the default values. After that, on the same object we are invoking set details method, means the old default values are replaced with these values. Similarly, on the second object. Next, to display the details of 2 objects, we will invoke this. We will see the memory. So if you see the memory, first the constructor will assign default values. After that, our parameterized set details method is invoked. At that time, the old default values are replaced with our actual values. So this is the parameterized method program memory part. So here if you observe, one object is created. First initially default constructor is executed, which will assign default values, that is 0, 0.0 and null. You have to write like this only. Don't take 2 objects like NOR method. No need to take like this, because these 2 objects are same only, no. That's why in the same object you replace the old values with new values. If you see, old values are first default constructor is executed, no. That's why 0, 0.0 and null. Afterwards, our set details parameterized method is executed, which will assign values, that is 10 to the roll number, 90.3 to marks and Ramu to name. But here don't write object. String is a separate object and student is one object. So inside one object we can't store one more object. What we can do is we can store only the reference variable of that object inside this object. That's why string object is created outside with separate memory and the address of this object is 20 and the object address is stored here in the reference variable name. So like this we have to create the memory. Similarly, for the second object also, first default constructor will assign default values to the instance variables. After that, whenever you invoke your display details parameterized method, the old values are replaced with new values in the same memory. Okay, this is the last way to initialize an object. So here we have 8 ways to initialize an object, to initialize the object or objects. We can initialize any number of objects now using the same parameterized method by invoking set details method, that is parameterized method. So here if you observe, so here in what is the drawback of NOR method, all the objects are assigned with the same values now. Here too we have taken only 2 objects, that's why these 2 objects are assigned with the same values. If you take 100 objects, 100 objects are assigned with the same values using NOR method. But if you take the parameterized method, each and every object is different, means with the different values. So here if you take this object, roll number is 10, marks 90.3, name is Ramu. But if you take the second object, here it is roll number is 20, marks 98.5 and name is Rani. Okay. So like that, the parameterized method, using the parameterized method, we can initialize the objects with different values. Okay, for the students. Okay. So here with this, the last program is completed. So if you see the 8 ways, so always constructors, use constructors, even though 8 ways are available to initialize an object or to initialize the instance variables of the object. But always try to use constructors to initialize the objects. Why? Because at the time of object creation, constructors are invoked directly. No need to invoke the constructor separately. No need to write the separate statement also. So at the time of creation of objects, constructors are invoked and the instance variables are assigned values inside the object. Suppose if you, that is the advantage of constructors over methods. Suppose if you write the methods, again you have to write the code, right? We have to invoke the methods separately using separate statements. And one more drawback is, if you initialize the object with methods, first the constructor is invoked and it will assign default values. After that only our method is executed and the old values are replaced with new values. See, that is the drawback. First compiler will assign default values. After that we are assigning our values in parameterized method. Suppose if you take the parameterized constructor. So what is happening in parameterized constructor? We will compare these two. So if you take the parameterized constructor, see, directly our values are assigned. See, one is roll number is 1, marks 95.3 and name is Ramu. These are the values which are assigned to these instance variables directly. That is the advantage of your parameterized constructor over parameterized method. If you take the parameterized method, first default values are assigned. After that only our values are assigned. Means same work, we are doing the same work 2 times. First default values, then our values. Unnecessary waste of time, no. But if you use the parameterized constructor, directly our values are assigned. That is the advantage of constructors over methods with respect to initialization of objects. That's why whenever you want to initialize the objects, always use the constructors. Don't use the methods. Even though methods are useful, methods are used to initialize the objects. So out of all these 8 ways, so constructors are very, very important to initialize the objects. So these are very, very important. So if you take any Java program, we have to use any one of these 6 ways. Okay, but out of all these 8, always use constructors. Suppose if you don't want to use any constructor on your own, leave it, then the compiler will provide default constructor for that class. But it is not compulsory to write the constructors on your own. Okay, if you don't write it, then compiler will take. But anyway, at the time of executing that object statement, compulsory one constructor must be executed, whether it is user-defined NOR constructor or user-defined parameterized constructor or default constructor. If you won't provide any constructor for that class, compiler will provide default constructor, which is a NOR constructor, which will assign default values for the instance variables based on the data type. That's why constructors will play very, very important role in each and every Java program. Without constructor execution, there is no program in Java. Because without creating object, there is no use of writing the classes in Java. No? First in Java, whenever you write a program, first write the class. Okay, the class can be employee class or student class or box class or any class. Whenever you write the class with variables and methods, after that to access the members of the class, you need to create objects. So object creation is must to access the members of the class. That's why, so whenever you execute that object statement, compulsory constructor is executed. No? So without creation of objects, there is no use of that class. That's why whenever you write the object syntax, okay, whenever that statement is executed, that object creation statement is executed, compulsory constructor is executed. No? That's why without constructors, there is no program. There are no programs in Java. In each and every program, whenever you create an object for a class, at that time, compulsory constructor must be executed. So understand the constructor concept. Because without constructor, without constructor execution, there is no Java program. Because compulsory we need to create objects now after defining the class. Whenever the object statements are getting executed by the JVM, compulsory one constructor must be executed. Okay, it can be default constructor which is provided by the compiler, or it can be if you write your own constructor, that is user-defined NOR constructor or user-defined parameterized constructor. Then if you write this one, it will be executed. or if you write parameterized constructor, it will be executed. Okay, at the time of object creation, compulsory one constructor must be executed. Now, suppose if you write the parameterized constructor, then how do we invoke that parameterized constructor is by sending the values, okay, to that constructor at the time of creating the object only. So constructors need not be invoked separately. I will show you that statement. How do we invoke this one? User defined parameterized constructor. If you take this class, in this class I have written the constructor on my own. This is called parameterized constructor. Why? Because here the name of the constructor and the name of the class must be same. That's why you can say it is a constructor and it is not having return type. Okay. Next, it is called parameterized constructor because it is taking 3 parameters. Like methods only, like methods, constructors will also take parameters. That's why you compare constructors or with methods only. But only difference is constructors do not have return type, methods must have return type. Only difference is that. And one more difference between constructors and methods is constructors need not be invoked explicitly, but methods must be invoked explicitly. You understand these 2 points? Okay, between constructors and methods. Here if you observe this constructor, we can say it is a parameterized constructor. So what is the purpose of this parameterized constructor is, the purpose of this parameterized constructor is to initialize the instance variables of that class. That's why the main purpose of constructors is to initialize the objects of that class. Okay, so that's why to initialize the objects of any class, always try to use the constructors. So better way is write the parameterized constructor. Why? Because using the parameterized constructor, we can different values to different students for the instance variables. If you take the no-arg constructor or if you write the no-arg constructor on your own in this class, so the drawback is all the objects are assigned with the same values. That's why better to use the parameterized constructor. So the main purpose of parameterized constructor is to initialize the objects with the different values. Okay. Now this is the parameterized constructor syntax. So name of the class and name of the constructor must be same. Inside that, how many parameters we need to take inside this in this constructor is based on the number of instance variables. Because these 3 are instance variables and these 3 instance variables are initialized inside each and every object. No? That's why here 3 instance variables are there, means take 3 parameters in the student constructor. So and one more important point is take the same data types. So here roll number is declared with int data type. Now here roll number 1 is also declared with int data type. Next after that, if you use different variable names for parameters which are not same as the instant variable names, so here always write left hand side because these instance variables need to be initialized. That's why write the parameters right hand side and this instance variables left hand side, because we are assigning values to the instance variables. That's why we need to write on the left side. Okay, this is one more important point. This is parameterized constructor. This is the new concept in Java. You know, on the no-arg methods and parameterized methods, like any normal methods only. You know, already in C language, you know how to write no-arg methods and parameterized methods and how to invoke the methods also, you know. But in Java, with respect to class concept, here the important concept is constructor. It is not there in C language. If you take any object-oriented programming language, whenever you write class, you can write constructor also. So this is the heart of Java program. Without constructor, there is no single Java program. So whenever you create a class, compulsory write one constructor. Okay, well, I already explained the drawback of using methods to initialize the objects. If you use the methods first, constructor is invoked, which will assign default values. After that, method is invoked. 2 times unnecessary work. That's why whenever you want to initialize the objects, always try to write the constructor on your own. If you won't write constructor, then compiler will provide the constructor. Okay, so always try to write the parameterized constructor to initialize the objects. It is nothing but to initialize the instance variables. Okay, because only instance variables are stored inside each object. That's why always try to write the parameterized method to initialize the objects of a class. So this is the parameterized method syntax. Student and write the parameters, and here if you take the same say parameter names which are same as the instance variable names, then use here this dot roll number is roll number, this dot marks is equal to marks, and this dot name is equal to name. If you want to use the parameter names and instance variable names same, then take this keyword, this dot roll number, this dot marks, this dot name. Is it okay? If you want to use different variable names, like assign like this. Roll number 1 is assigned to roll number, marks 1 to marks 1. So this is the syntax for parameterized constructor, which is very, very important in any Java program. Next, after that, how do I invoke this is normal method. Put parenthesis. So how do I invoke the parameterized constructor is, see, at the time of creation of object only, I am invoking the parameterized constructor. I am not invoking the constructor separately like s1.setDetails method. s1.setDetails. We have to write separate statement. No, if you write setDetails method for initialization of an object. But here, constructor need not be invoked explicitly. At the time of creation of an object, we have to invoke the constructor, or the constructor is invoked implicitly. Here there is no separate statement. That's why the advantage of constructors over methods is, constructors, two drawbacks are there if you use methods. You need to invoke the methods explicitly, that is one drawback. And when you invoke the method, before invoking the method, already the constructor will assign default values. After that only our values are assigned. 2 times same initialization is done in case of methods. But if you take the constructor, directly your values are assigned inside the object. Because whenever this statement is executed, this constructor is executed. From this statement, this is the invocation of constructor. So at the time of creation of object only, this constructor, parameterized constructor is invoked. From this statement, JVM will go to this student class and it will execute the matching constructor. So this is the matching constructor for that one. That's why it will execute the matching constructor, and whatever values we are sending through this constructor, that is for the first student I am sending 195.3 and Ramu. So those values are assigned to these parameters, roll number, marks 1 and name 1. And after that, these roll number 1, marks 1 and name 1 are assigned to the instance variable. Like that, the first object is created with the values 195.3 and Ramu directly. But if you take setDetails method, first default constructor will assign default values. After that, your values are assigned. But here directly our values are assigned. So this is the advantage of constructor over method. This is called parameterized constructor. If you want to use parameterized method, we can use. But don't use the methods for initialization of objects. Always use the constructors only to initialize the objects. Okay, you remember these two statements. These two are very, very important. Okay, so with this initialization of objects concept is completed. These do in the lab all these, execute all these 8 programs in the lab. Then if you execute and if you see the output, then you can understand more clearly. Okay. See already in Java you have lab syllabus now. For lab programs you need not to prepare separately. Okay. So whatever programs I am explaining in the theory class now, they are useful for lab also. No need to write the separate programs for lab. That is the advantage in Java. So in lab also you will get the program like this. So I write a Java program using parameterized constructor, or write a Java program using NOR constructor. Like that only we have programs. That's why no need to prepare programs separately for lab. Whatever programs I am explaining in the theory class, they are sufficient for lab also. That's why try to listen the class carefully.